Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have you here at Webinar Wednesday with Horses and Humans Research Foundation. You are in for a treat tonight. You have two experts, industry leaders, Molly and Nancy. We're so excited to have part two of their trauma presentation back by popular demand. So why don't first we just do a little bit of housekeeping. Please put yourselves on mute and introduce yourself in the chat. HHRF is really invested in knowing who you are, how we can support you, what you're doing in the industry. This is all about networking and collaborating, people from all over the country. So please share and get in contact with each other. I am Tara Mahoney. I am honored to be a part of the board of HHRF as well as the Education Committee. So on behalf of the board and the Education Committee, who have worked a ton to be able to put together some amazing events for you, as well as the conference, these webinars, and funding research. We really appreciate your support. We appreciate you joining us, and please donate. I have no shame in my game. We really need the support and the help. So whether it's $5, 50, 5,000, feel free.
So $1 million.
5 million, yep, sure, we'll take that too. So please support HHRF and the important work. People are working really, really hard to make sure that equine assisted services are, the efficacy is really documented with rigorous research. And many thanks to Molly Sweeney, who is our inspiration, and she is on here. So you have an incredibly talented team available. So without much more, actually tomorrow, Pebbles and Octavia Brown are going to be presenting with Ohio. Octavia, you know how to say it.
Ohio.
Ohio, thank you. I know I'm supposed to yodel it, but and that's tomorrow at 3:30. So if you're looking for an incredible panel of international presenters, as well as our very own Pebbles and Octavia, Michael Kaufman is moderating that. So please share and spread the word on great things happening in the industry. Let's see. So not to beat it down, we would love to just get started here. Molly and Nancy, take it away. Please introduce yourselves. And this is they are here for you. So start asking questions. They are experts and available to make sure that this is a conversation, answering to the best that they can any industry questions you have. Welcome, Molly and Nancy, take it away.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. And Nancy, I know I will turn it over to you because I know you're going to do neurology, and I'll let you introduce yourself. And lots of grace for Nancy today, who had her COVID shot yesterday.
So I'm Nancy Coyne. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been trying to retire for lots of years, but every time I retire, the economy crashes. It seems to be doing that again. So I'll make it working. Anyway, I've been doing equine facilitated psychotherapy for the past 20-ish years. And that's what I love to do. And why do I love to do it? Is because it's wonderfully helpful for people with trauma. And for some reason, most of the people who come to me have some kind of trauma. So I wasn't actually going to talk about neurology exactly, but I wanted to talk a little bit before we start. Why don't, Molly, could you just say a little bit about what we did last time?
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. I'm Molly DePrekel. I'm a psychologist in private practice in Minnesota, and I saw somebody originally from Michigan too. So woo woo to the Michiganders. And I have been doing this work for about 30 years. I have lots of good mentors on the call, so that makes me anxious and nervous, but I'll work with that. I work primarily at two facilities. One is called the Midwest Center for Trauma and Emotional Healing, and the other is called Hold Your Horses. And I do my equine or therapy with the help of a horse out at Hold Your Horses. And I work a lot with people with trauma, and I have the, I would say, the gifting to, or pleasure to work with kids who are sexually exploited youth in Hennepin County. And we have a contract with the county, and they come out and do their equine work with us, and in various stages of recovery from trafficking. And last time we talked a little bit about what our work is. We did a couple case studies, I think, and we basically just had a fireside chat about what trauma looks like, about some of Stephen Porges' work, and kind of just answered the questions that we could, and gave an overview of what trauma looks like, and a couple, I think, ideas about how to work with people with trauma. And so we're, Pebble said they liked it, come back. And we said, oh, okay. People like to talk about trauma. And I will also say, just a caveat about trauma, that's the new, when I started in this field, there was, the word was everybody has ADHD. Then everybody had borderline. Then everybody had this and everybody had that. And trauma is the new kind of catch-all word. And trauma is subjective. Nancy and I could have had the same experiences, and one of us had trauma around it and one of us didn't. So just aware of that. And as you look for people who are educated in this work with trauma and things, ask questions, because a lot of people say, I work with trauma, and you really have to know what that really means and what that looks like. So there you go, Nancy. That's the elevator speech I got tonight.
Okay, good. So, before we get started, are there some burning issues that anybody has? Questions that people would like us to address?
Throw them in the chat if you have them.
I can't see that. How do I see the chat? Oh, I see it's down here.
There's nothing so far. People have been introducing themselves, but no questions yet.
Okay.
So Nancy and Molly, Deborah from the Education Committee is monitoring the whole chat for you. She'll send questions to me and I'll pitch them to you. So that you don't have to lose track of your conversation. We'll take care of all that for you.
Okay, so you haven't got any questions yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so I would like to continue the format we did last time, Molly, in terms of just talking back and forth about the work that we do. And then please do raise the issues that, all of you raise the issues that come to mind, because that's what we're here for, to have a conversation. I recently looked at a couple of courses that Ruth Basinski has put on the NICAM website about trauma and the treatment of trauma. It's kind of an overview of all of the, the principal people who've been working the last 20, 30 years and what their theories are. And it's all very interesting. I mean, I think the thing that comes to me is that I got drawn to working with horses with trauma after utilizing yoga, art therapy, some talk therapy, some movement therapy for years. And when I started to work with the horses, I thought, this is perfect. Because horses are natural yogis, and they help us to calm down. And I think that when I think about all the fancy theories, I've been doing psychiatry and psychotherapy, mostly psychotherapy, for 49 years. And so I've been through all of the vogues, from psychoanalysis to, behavioral therapy to, kinds of talk therapy and all the newer kinds of modalities. And people have very complicated explanations about what works and why it works. But what I've observed is that the one most important thing that the horses help us do, two most important things, is they help us calm down so we can think clearly and be in touch with our body sensations, which are mediated through the 80% of the vagal nerves that give information from the body to the brain. So they help us calm down and be aware, be mindful, and they help us connect, which is, if we think about the vagal system, connecting is the highest function. That's where we're calm and happy and safe. So it's not so complicated. I mean, those of us who work with horses see it every day. Molly, can you comment on that? Did I leave anything out, or is that accurate in your?
No, I mean, I'm a sensory motor psychotherapist,
Right.
which is somatic practice. And
Yep.
so I would concur with, being regulated in your nervous system. Horses ask of that. And when, a lot of trauma clients might not be, and then horses can help them get more regulated.
Right. And that's a profound experience. I mean, you can't always see it from the outside, but people will, someone will be standing next to a horse. It's the first time they've ever been that close to a horse on the ground. And they'll say to me, "Oh my God, I haven't felt this present since I was 4 years old." I mean, it doesn't look like anything's happening on the outside, but the experience of getting present and calming down and being in touch with the whole sensory motor experience that is going on all the time in our bodies is really profound. So it doesn't fit any of the diagnostic systems that we are forced to learn to get our licenses, but it certainly fits what we know about psychopathology and well-being. And if well-being is the goal or the place we'd all like to be, and our clients would like to be, then it makes perfect sense how the horses facilitate that. Does that make sense to people? I mean, okay.
So Nancy, I'm going to just jump in and
Please.
from what you're talking about, the idea of neuroplasticity in the brain.
Mhm.
And that's the idea that you can learn a new way of being. So if everybody just takes their hand, puts it up on the screen like this, and tucks your thumb in, and put your hand over your thumb. This is a very simple way of looking maybe at the brain, even though this is not the brain, but we're going to pretend. So this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, this part, horses help us stay regulated by bringing the prefrontal cortex online. And then if everybody goes like this, when you flip your lid, literally, and this part of your brain, which is the limbic brain, runs the show, you're not necessarily thinking clearly. So everybody go like this and just give your limbic brain a hug. And you can do that with a breath. You can do that with movement. And when you're with horses and you go, "Wah," horses go, "What? There must be something going on. Not regulated." And so then when you can say to somebody, "Let's just take a minute and take a breath." Or they might say, "I can't really get regulated. I'm not." And I'm like, "Well, put your hand on the side of the horse.
Mhm.
Feel their breath or feel their breathing."
And allow the touch sense to get to work.
Yeah,
right?
and it's like Pebbles is calling it the kind of oh no, I just looked at that. Bottom up processing. Horses help us not from the head to the feet, but from the ground up, that bottom up processing. So when you give your prefrontal gives your limbic system a hug, horses really help with that. And they also help when you're dysregulated to find a way back to regulation. Horses' safety depends on the behavior of everyone in the herd. And so when we connect with them and become, I don't want to say we become a herd member because we're not horses, but we're out there with them in that connected space, and they need us to find our own regulation in our nervous system so that they can calm down and go, "Oh, I can deal with this. I can come back. I can be in my body." And I think we can share a couple case studies when we get closer to the end, but I just wanted to give you kind of a visual of how I see horses being able to work. And they give us the ability to regulate our nervous system. And they're also, I don't know if you've ever been around a horse, but I'm going to guess some of you have. They're kind of big. So not every horse is big. We have a gentleman out there named Bingo, and we call him Lancelot because he's a pony, but he likes to think that he's very handsome and very large. His presence is large. So his energy field is large. And so that novel experience when somebody's like, they're kind of big. Yeah, they are. And there also can be, how do you make them safe? Recognizing they are also big and they could hurt you. So how do I stay calm? How do I also sometimes move my feet quickly because they might step on me? So when people do that, I'm like, that was really great. You have the ability in your insides to keep yourself safe. And for trauma clients, the first time they hear that, they look at you like you have just spoken Dutch. And when you can say, you moved your feet, what allowed you to do that? You do have an ability inside your nervous system to keep yourself safe. So all those nuances that horses provide with those micro movements and those connections, trauma clients have a different experience of who they might be in the world. And Nancy, I'll jump back to you. I've kind of just blathered.
I love what you said. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago. I was mentoring a student in California who has 18 horses. He's a wonderful horse person. And he raises gypsy vanners from babies. So he wanted to challenge me, and he brought a baby into the brown pen, and he said, okay, I want you to help this baby settle down. Well, she turned around, threatened to kick, galloped around the brown pen, and he was keeping me safe. So I wasn't afraid. I knew that I wouldn't get hurt intellectually, but my sympathetic nervous system was like, ah! Right? And what we did was he demonstrated how, with my breath and my body movement, I could calm her down. I could co-regulate her. And it was profound. It was really profound. I mean, I am not an expert horse person, even after 20 years of living with them and working with them. I consider myself an utter beginner. But it was a profound experience, not just about horses, but about my ability to stand up and remain calm in a situation where I was scared. So, I mean, that's an example, which is, I mean, don't try that at home if you're not comfortable with it, but it was a very important experience. So, and of course, it has ramifications in our lives. I mean, things happen, violence. We live in a world that's full of violence, and I'm terrified of physical violence. You know, I don't know how to fight with my hands. So learning how to manage my nervous system to help somebody else's nervous system calm down is important with humans as well as with horses. Does that speak to anybody?
I love that, Nancy. We do an exercise sometimes with some of our teen girls who are the sexually exploited youth kids, and we have a couple horses in the arena, and we do up regulation and down regulation.
Right.
And so we have kids get a little loud and say, let's go trot. And they kind of work us together with either the facilitator or another client. And they'll watch the horse's energy pick up and move faster. And then we teach about down regulation by, can you try easy with your voice? Can you get calmer in your body? Can you lower your shoulders? And then the horses will often slow down and they'll be looking at me like, no way.
Right.
And I'm like, if you can calm down 950 pounds with your body language and some calm words, I wonder if you can do that in your classroom or at school. Or sometimes in the world, you might have to upregulate and get bigger and stand up to power and say no. And so can you do that also? And then sometimes, how do you know when it's safe to like horses, they'll flee. I'm out of here. It's like, when do you know I'm out of here? When do you know stand your ground? And so teaching all of those things to people who don't feel like they can function very well in the world and have a regulated nervous system, and teach them moment by moment that they can impact another living being, and they also then can change their nervous system, because that neuroplasticity idea, I can learn a new way of being,
Right.
and I can rewire my brain. So
Right.
that trauma brain goes kind of like this. And when they can work with horses and have different experiences, they can unwrap that trauma neurology and build new neural pathways, which give new ways. I'm sorry, I'm covering my face, but new ways of being in the world. And when they practice this more and more, that hardwired neural pathway for trauma can get less, and the other ones can build more.
Right. Right. Beautifully said. Yeah. There was something I was going to say. Yeah.
About 2 weeks ago, I work with military, and we had an active duty special forces weekend. And so I had a bunch of Navy SEALs that are active duty, and one of the commanders, wow, they upregulated like that, right? So I heard at Liberty, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do here. And it was fascinating, exactly what you're saying, right? Is then how do you downregulate? And so I think in a lot in trauma, that dysregulation is reflected. And then how do they do that? We have a lot of people here that I see, from VAs and working with veterans and military. And right, so that's, a little bit of a different type of experience where you have to upregulate, you have to have that vigilance.
But you also have to be able to downregulate. Which is what you're saying. Is so.
Have to have the mindfulness to be able to know when and where and how and who. So really interesting about how the horses reflect that. Could you guys speak a little bit? I mean, you said a little bit about how trends, from, DBT, EMDR, prolonged exposure therapy, any of those things. What are you finding when you're working with people in the arena? How are you integrating kind of an eclectic approach with the horses?
I may not be politically correct, and at this point in my career, I just celebrated the 30th anniversary of my 30th birthday, so I don't care anymore. I believe for trauma clients, whether you're doing EMDR or accelerated resolution training or Linda Kohanoff techniques or whatever, or EGALA techniques or whatever your training is, the more information that you give to someone who struggles with trauma about what they're going to experience, about the horses, the better they do. Because the trauma clients I work with, they know what it feels like to go into situations without information. They know what it's like to have to figure things out. Some of my trauma clients, I would love it someday for someone to take a picture of people with a trauma brain and then my brain, because I feel like my brain's a pea brain. And my clients with trauma, their capacity in their brain is amazing for flipping channels, for doing stuff, for multitasking. But the fact is, in my belief system, I have come to realize for trauma, I am going to tell people, here's a halter. This is how it goes on a horse. This is what it's used for. This is a lead rope. This is how you do it safely. You don't want to wrap your hands. I don't want them trying to figure it out, because then I become one more person in their life who's unsafe. And so when I can show and demonstrate, and then I say, you try it. Now, when your mom comes to pick you up, why don't you show your mom how to put a halter on so that they feel like they're empowered and teach? And for often, some of my clients don't ever feel like they have much to offer. And then to be able to try some things out that they're learning. Not that I don't say, let's go out and see what happens with the horse, because I do that all the time. I feel like that's a very advanced skill, however. And I loved when Nancy said, don't try this at home, because trauma, horse work, I feel like sometimes there's 3 or 4 channels I have to be on. But I guess, Tara, I have a passion for helping people understand trauma is very nuanced. And the more information that people have, the less they have to feel like they have to be on guard or upregulated, and they can settle in. And the other piece I would say with trauma is it's about changing things a little bit at a time. because trauma clients sometimes are it's this or it's that. I had a client today and she goes, well, it's that or this. I'm like, no, it's not. What percent of your body, what percent of your perspective can change today so that whatever, 10%, 20%, 50% of you can feel like right now I can feel regulated. And she said 50%. I'm like, great. Can you let 50% of whatever we were working with, we did a rescue mission around a younger part of herself, which is, again, some of my training and work, she could let that go. And then she could really, we recycled it, sent it to earth, things like that. But it's important that people understand if they say to you, I can't do that today, Molly, no problem. I love that you know that. Let's not groom the horse. Maybe let's just go out and observe. Let's take some chairs, sit across the fence, talk a little bit, observe. But we let people decide, and we let them decide based on not necessarily just what their brain is telling them, because there's protective parts in the brain and all that, and they might just go on and on and on. But I say, time out. If you could listen to your heart brain, and if you could listen to your gut brain, what might that tell you about what needs to happen today? Because I really want my clients to start regulating their own nervous system. Because if I'm the regulator, that means I got to go home with them. I got to live with them. I got to eat supper with them. And I don't want to. They can learn ways to regulate their own nervous system by the interactions with the horses. They can take it wherever they go. So I have some clients who get mad at me and say, well, I want you to help. But I'm like, no, because you don't want to take me home with you.
Right. Right.
So go ahead, Nancy. I'm kind of blathering again.
No, you're covering a lot of ground, and the somatic piece is so important because getting in touch with the nooception, N-O-O-ception, I never know how to pronounce that. That is the visceral knowing that we all have. You know, we have a gut feeling, we have a heart sense, we have a muscle sense, and getting in touch with that is critical in every situation in our lives. And, you know, of course with horses, but in our lives all the time. And I think that's one of the biggest contributions to the trauma arsenal of tools is incorporating what we know about visceral sensation and teaching people to pay attention to that, because we have been taught by our culture not to pay attention to that, override it. And so to feel grounded and safe and be able to think clearly and know what our emotions are, get the message so that we can act sensibly in our own best interest. All of that requires cultivating the body senses. So coming back to the question to asked, which is a very important question, what about all these techniques that we've learned over the years? You know, in 25 years ago, when Bessel van der Kolk first talked about EMDR, it seemed like the be all and end all, and it's a wonderful tool. And so is CBT, and so is somatic experiencing, and so is, I mean, we have lots of tools in our arsenal now, and all of these tools are just that, they're tools. We pick what tool we need for the task. You're smiling.
Oh, I was smiling because on Laura's screen, somebody just waved at everybody. So I was smiling.
She's here also. She's just not on camera. She's on my camera.
So I don't know, does that address the question of what about all these techniques? Is one of them better than the other? No, they're all really important. I don't know what word better than tools and so how do you know which one to use when? How do you know, Molly?
Well,
how do you know which one to use when?
Then my answer is going to be what I tell all my students when I teach at the University of Denver in the animal assisted interventions courses. I say it depends. And, you know, I am trained in EMDR, I am trained in ART and sensory motor. I think I would say for my trauma clients now, I do a lot more EMDR resourcing than I do reprocessing. I've had a lot of clients who actually have had therapy treatment programs, and unfortunately, they did EMDR like the last week they were there for chemical dependency or things like that, and they wanted to get in a little bit of EMDR, and they left really traumatized because EMDR is a very powerful technique, and that bilateral stimulation of both hemispheres of the brain, you really got to be careful with it. So I do a ton more resourcing. In my sensory motor training, we're doing a lot more teaching people about what your resources are. Because I can name, you know, if you ask me, how's your life been this week? I can name you the 2 or 3 things that didn't go well, quick, like that. It's right there. If you ask me what went well, it takes me a minute. But I think for trauma clients, we have to notice, what did you do well? How did you resource yourself this week? What felt better? I do a lot with transitional objects. My clients will take a picture of themselves with the horse. They will have a horse braid. I have a client who, without going into a lot of details, she has a lot of nightmares. And one of the horses in her mind's eye stays at the end of her bed. There, a couple of my clients who are younger than me and smarter than me with Google. Hey, have the Google app now, and that you can take like a picture of an animal and blow it up and put a picture in your room. You know, like it's anyway. I don't know how to do it, but one of my clients she was out washing her car, helping her mom, and she had a picture of her horse next to her on Google in this app, standing next to the car. I'm like, amazing! You have to show me how to do that. So there's all sorts of transitional objects that we can do. That help people resource and ground. The one thing I will say is I heard Tara say prolonged exposure. I am not trained in it. All of my insides for me, I am not a strong proponent of that for people with severe trauma. I don't think, and this is again, I'm saying my opinion, but to put people in a situation where what I have learned and believe is that when you stay in that hyper aroused state or hypo frozen state and it continually happens, it's like this to your nervous system again and again, and it can form a new trauma and a new neural pathway for a larger, bigger trauma. So that is just my belief system. I had a client today who came in with severe anxiety, and I'm working with her on regulating her nervous system, and she's also working with the horses at the barn doing some other work with the horses, and we had to downregulate because if we continue to talk about where she's anxious, why she's anxious, we're creating more anxiety. So I spent the whole session with her and it looks like, you know, I have that whole psycho brain in here going, I'm not doing enough. Are we doing a goal? Am I going to be able to explain this to the insurance company? And at some point I go, I'm working with what's in front of me. And her eyes are blinking fast, and she's darting, and she's alert. So I have to help her regulate first. And we brought in the horse in the session today. What are you doing? How do you do that with Bentley? How do you work with that? And then the other piece is that I'm loving is I'm doing more co-therapy sessions with an occupational therapist. And we're regulating. It's a beautiful, to myself and Janet, who's out at Hold Your Horses, it's a beautiful thing that we're starting to pilot because, surprise, surprise, when you move, you might feel better. Oh, who knew? You know,
Right.
and working with the horses in that way, and sometimes even being able to be on while I'm doing some of the self-regulating and she's doing some of the movement. It's fascinating and it's lovely, lovely work.
You have such a good point, right, about prolonged exposure. Same kind of experience is I kind of steered away from that. And what I started to realize was people started to have fun.
Yeah.
And I think we forget about that, right? Is oh my goodness, I haven't laughed so hard. I haven't heard myself laugh until I heard that horse fart. Or, that's not very researchy. Sorry, Molly. But, right, is all of a sudden there is just something very authentic about being with a sentient being. And like Nancy, you said, connecting. Do you guys, we all say, trauma is heavy and serious work. Do you incorporate fun? Do you bring any of that into your lessons of just that, kind of, it feels good? Why?
So if you think about the ventral vagal system, it's about connection of the face and heart. It's about love and fun. And joy and love are the antidote to distress. I mean, think about just in general, and not just for trauma survivors. So the experience of being able to, I was watching a woman who has a long trauma history. She has made a connection with this wonderful old cow horse. And when I first met him, he looked like a broken down. I mean, I didn't think anybody should ride him. He was totally shut down. And so she spent some time connecting with him, and now they have this love relationship. They're just beautiful. And I watched her. This woman is in her, I don't know, 70s, and she, I watched her canter on this old cow horse who looked like he was 5 years old when he was cantering. He was having a wonderful time. She was having a wonderful time. She said later, I'm in my happy place. And that is a healing experience. I mean, that is, if we could, and we can't manufacture that, but it is, that's healing. When people talk about addiction, what's his name? Oh, the addiction guy. His name's just gone in my head. Mate talks about addiction is about the inability to be connected. So connection is the antidote, and love and joy are the antidote to the kind of distress that drives addiction and lots of other distress behaviors. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Awesome, Nancy. Thank you so much, both of you.
Can we get? I would say, go ahead, Tara.
Yeah.
I would just say play is
Yeah.
absolutely critical. I usually end my sessions with a really bad horse joke, and my clients roll their eyes, but they're laughing. I use play for regulation. If the horses, I have a horse named Whisper, and he'll come up and he'll just get like right here, and he'll be like, "Hey, you're not regulated. You're not in your body." And unfortunately, sometimes he'll nip you if you're not in your body. So we have to talk about it. But that play part is so important for trauma clients. And again, titrate it with your clients, because some clients, if they're playing, they're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it's scary. And it's like, I'm like, is there any part of you on the inside that can play, that can just, let's throw a ball back and forth. I have a horse that one of my clients is teaching to bowl and put a basketball through the hoop. We're doing a lot of clicker training, and that's play for her. And I'm like, go home and investigate clicker training. She goes, Molly, seriously, this is my therapy work? I'm like, yes. To tolerate being able to have a little fun, to look up something and learn a new skill, and to train the horse, that is absolutely your trauma homework. So play, 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 and recognize for some clients, that's too scary. So we titrate play. 5% of you can play. Find your little kid inside that wants to play. Let her just notice the horse is playing. Let the horse roll. We play that song, Let It Go, from Frozen all the time, and my clients are like, are we going to listen to that again? Yep, we are. And the horse will poop or roll, and I'm like, can you let anything you want to let go? Shake, move it, let it go.
So Molly, as you're talking, what you're not saying, but you're saying with all of your examples, is how important it is to have a trusting, respectful, loving, compassionate relationship with your client. I mean, this is not about applying a dry technique. Okay, so EMDR, so first you do resources, and then you do this, and then you do that. This is everything you do is in the context of a sensitive, caring, respectful relationship with your client. And I'm just so impressed to hear you express that without even saying it.
Thank you. I will say yes, and my goal now is to help them build that with themselves
Mhm.
and to show up. I don't care. I have a client right now, and she goes, "Well, I have to trust you and I have to attach to you." I'm like, "No, you don't." And she looked at me horrified. I said, "If I show up in a trustworthy manner, that's what you need to know. And if you ever don't feel like I can be trustworthy, fire me." And I have clients tell me, "I know I can trust you." And I'm like, "Well, why?" Because of how you work with the animals, because of when you say thank you to the horse, because you ask permission, because you check in. And
Yeah.
so I want clients to know that I can be trustworthy, and I want them to learn that trusting, heartfelt relationship with their insides and all their littles on the inside and all their adult awareness, and stay in their adult awareness. And the adult awareness goes in and checks in with the littles on the inside and helps them.
Yeah.
So I'm much less about attachment with me. I'm much more about attaching to themselves and sometimes the animals, because, well, we're animals too, but the horses. Um, and helping them build that neural pathway on the inside so that it leaves with them and stays with them, and they can start to trust their own experiences, which is so instrumental with horse work, Nancy, because
Mhm.
when they start to listen to their gut with the horses and it works out, and sometimes it doesn't, they can not analyze it, they can figure it out on the insides and go, well, that worked or that didn't work. And I do have a trustworthy gut, and I can start to listen, and I don't have to override my nervous system anymore.
Right.
And I can say no to people.
Right.
I think, can I say something? I think I work a lot with, I think a lot of times we talk about trauma as like something that has happened, but I work with folks like transgender folks that like it's traumatic to be a trans person in the United States right now. I live in New Orleans, like half the population is Black. I work with a lot of people of color. I work with kids in foster care. I work with veterans that are going to the Tulane Center for Brain Health for like TBI and PTSD, but are still like doing special ops work, right? And so I feel like when we are treating trauma, like sometimes it makes sense that these clients, like that part of their brain is still triggered because like, guess what? Like you kind of do have to be on edge when you go back to that neighborhood at night and there's 16 gunshots and you need to figure out like where they came from and which way, like you need to run. And so I really appreciate what you're saying about connecting people to themselves, because that connection between mind and body is probably one of the only things that can keep them safe. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like our expectations are too high for them, given the reality that people are living in. And I really enjoy what you both are saying about the importance of the relationship, because even 1 hour of safety is at least a break for their nervous system, whether it's safety with me, safety with the horse, and like having some of those corrective emotional experiences. But I wonder what our field can do about that, and part of it is a social justice problem, but and even thinking about some of the models, like the Igala model is totally not trauma informed. I mean, that could trigger someone to the ends earth, like well before they're ready to deal with a lot of things, and even the PATH model is like super incredibly limited. And yet, like, we're still doing research on these models, acting as though they could really help folks that are in some of these really down and out ongoing, like Resma calls it pervasive stress disorder, not post-traumatic stress disorder, but like pervasive stress disorder. And I wonder if y'all work with folks like that, and what is the best way that you have found for folks that we can't change where they go home to or the job that they have just at this moment, or whether or not their parents going to do the things to get them back and provide like a safe and healthy home.
I am in Minneapolis right now, and most of you know it's been an interesting time to be here. And I'm actually doing a book study with Resma's book right now, so I appreciate that you brought that up. I will tell you that sometimes with some of my clients, I'll say, okay, we have to help you suit up again or armor up a little bit, because I don't want them to leave so vulnerable and free, because they do come from environments that might not be safe, or home sometimes. And so what could you learn today that can help you, that you know about, and also trust that you have gotten this far and you've kept yourself safe. So what are you already doing every day? Tell me about that. Tell me what works when you you know, and um, sometimes for my teens or my adult clients, it's like, I want you to tell the rest of my family what we're working on, or I want to show them so that I can help them, or I can help them understand what it's like to be out in the world. And quite honestly, sometimes I'm like, all right, did you know you just made 1,200 pounds stop? I bet that you can take some of those skills back into your neighborhood, into your school to help you learn what it feels like to be safe. And sometimes it's about get out of the way. I teach that Aikido move to the side, and sometimes get out of the way of that energy. And then to show up sometimes downregulated or upregulated when you're in a situation that is dangerous. Because you are so right, Kelly, we live in a world that's funky. You know, it's a funky, humans right now are funky. They're funkier than horses. Sometimes I'm like, okay, humans, you go stand in the corner, everybody take a break for the day, take a retreat, the whole world.
Yeah. We'll put that diagnostic code in DSM-6, right? Funky. So we have a few questions in the chat and want to make sure we just spend some time on them. We only have about 9 minutes left. So one of the questions from Anna, much has been written about inherited or historical trauma from parents or experiences of older family members. How can horses aid people who appear to struggle with this form of trauma? So that's inherited or historical trauma.
Tara, can we have another webinar?
There you go. Okay, we only have 8 minutes. Anna.
Nancy, you want to, I mean, there's a lot I do with that around your nervous system and what's locked in your body. And we work with ancestors. And I mean, yes, there is ways to do it. Nancy, why don't you jump in?
I agree. I mean, it's the same principles apply. Whatever the source of the trauma is, that the way of getting in touch with your body sensation, with learning to up and down regulate, and getting grounded. I mean, are the same principles, because people still need to learn how to keep themselves safe. They need to learn. And I would like, Molly, I'd like you to say more about the positive installations. Talk about what you mean by that. I mean, you referenced it. You said, well, what did you do this week that worked? You know, but say a little more about that. I think that's so important.
Well, I think in relation to this question with historical trauma and, you know, we have epigenetics, we inherit stuff. And to be able to say, eventually being able to get people to recognize, you know, the stuff I inherited, it stops with me. And so I can do things every day to help not carry that to my children or to move it through. But I think, again, what got you where you are now? What have you achieved resource-wise that helped you? What can you recognize in the strengths of your ancestors? And sometimes know that ancestors and parents can be tricky. And to be able to say, it's really hard if you're caregiver when you're a little kid and you want to reach and the caregiver's tricky, at the same time you're pushing away as you're reaching, then your nervous system gets messed up. So how do we understand not everything was all good or all bad? But I think, again, resource clients. And Tara, I want to keep going because I know there's other questions.
Yeah, so next one, awesome answers. And it sounds like we have now a part 3 to schedule with Nancy and Molly. So this is great. Okay, one from Catherine. Do you think the horse's ability to stay regulated while so highly sensitive and the impact of their nervous system, heart math research, on people then models it for trauma survivors? So the horse's ability to stay regulated, is that why it has such an impact?
The answer to me is it depends. I think a short answer is yes. I've also seen horses dysregulate, and to be able to say to clients, that's not about you, and you didn't cause that, and how are you going to stay regulated even in the face of dysregulation? But I do believe, people often say horses mirror. I don't believe that. I believe they attune. They attune to what's around them, and they will demonstrate whatever needs to happen. It's so beautiful and subtle and micro movement. But yes, in theory, I agree with that. There's a lot more to it than that.
Great answer. Here's another one from Dr. Novus. Situational awareness. Is there really ever a break? Situational awareness keeps them alive, and that's the reality. So a little bit about what Keely was saying and we were talking about before. Not sure. Let's see. So another question here. The Zoom user co-facilitates with an LPC for families entering separation and divorce. This is actually huge right now. A lot of family discord, marital discord, couples counseling. So great question. We have the parents co-lead a herd member, a lead rope on each side with the children observing. It shows the parents can co-lead and compromise and connect. It creates a safe, playful atmosphere. What do you guys think about in a family session, how you can pull in a horse?
I've done that exact activity, learned it from Linda Tellington Jones. Beautiful. I had a kid on a horse and the family dynamics, and the horse wouldn't go because one was going one way and one was going the other, and I didn't have to say anything. And I actually got paid for that session. So love that. Agree completely. And you have to make sure that your horses know about what that's like. Train your horses ahead of time, make sure they're comfortable with it, and be able to also advocate for the ethical treatment of the horse in that too.
Yeah.
Really good point. And that's what next webinar will be about, equine well-being. Nancy, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that Molly said it really well.
Colleen's wondering, what's the name of the book you were referring to, Molly?
Is the RESMA book? Okay. It's my grandmother's hands. And it's lovely. And RESMA does a nice job, and it's wonderful because it goes through activities that you can do, and it talks about white bodies and black bodies and historical trauma. And if you're going to look at it, I would invite you to grab a couple people and do a book study, because it goes through somatic experiencing of white privilege, of being in a black body. It's intense. It's good.
So we have about 3 minutes left. How about we hold off on questions, and Molly and Nancy, anything that you would say, lessons learned, I wish I knew, or just something that could this is a great crowd who is all of them doing great work. Anything that you could kind of empower, excite? Oof, I just threw a big lob at you.
Don't forget to enjoy yourself. Don't forget to play. Don't forget why you got into this work. I would say find ways to off gas with your horses, with your, compassion fatigue is a big thing in this field now. So find ways to get what you need for yourself, to show up for your clients. Wipe off your horses after they work with clients energetically, so that they don't have to carry. And I say to the horses, this is not yours, let it go. The last thing I would say is Tara, you said, what do I wish I would have had? I wish I would have had more ability to have case consultations about the clients I'm seeing. And that's something I'm trying to create for people. So I do consultation if anybody's ever interested. I'm doing that for sensory motor training right now. And I'm also doing it for animal assisted and equine, because I think sometimes we just have to say, let me talk to you about a client I'm working with, or let me talk to you about techniques, and learning more from each other. And
Actually,
I'll turn it over to Nancy.
During COVID, I started working by FaceTime with my clients with horses. So the client and the student and the horse would be in California, and I was in Arizona with a FaceTime camera. And the funniest thing that happened was the horse was at the other end of a big arena, and the client was saying, I wish I had a friendly horse, a horse that would let me snuggle with him. I wish I had a really loving horse. He's so persnickety, and and meanwhile, the horse is walking towards her. She's paying no attention, and the horse puts his head on her shoulder. I thought, FaceTime with horses? This show is amazing. But, I think what it told me is that it doesn't matter what the trauma is or what the situation is, the principles apply. Safety, resourcing, working with the body sensations, having fun, helping people move from freeze into connection. All of those principles work, whatever the situation is. I mean, that learning how to up and down regulate. So it doesn't really, and it applies in the big sense, you know, when we're talking about racial trauma, or, you know, the trauma being different, whatever your difference is. It works. I mean, that's what's so precious about this, that we don't have to belong to one school or another school. We just have to, you know, sort of see what works in the situation.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your time and talent. It's amazing. The chat box is filling up with thank yous, and so gracious to be, you know, with like-minded people, and, you know, so much validation at the same time, so much excitement to learn and do more. So to all of you, thank you so much for sharing this hour. We know your time is really important. Please stay tuned with HHR. Share this with your other colleagues. It's just an amazing webinar series. Certainly, Molly and Nancy, you guys are on the hook. We're going to do quarterly fireside chats, I think. You know, you're hired, voluntold.
Actually, I just want to let you know that we had 146 views on YouTube from your last fireside chat. That's why I said y'all had to come back on and do a part 2, because that was a lot of views. So yeah, your YouTube rock stars for HHRF. And for everybody else on the call, if you will subscribe to our HHRF YouTube channel, that will also be very helpful for us, but also for you when we post another video.
Yeah, put your hand up, pat yourself on the back for showing up. That's part of the deal. You showed up tonight, you do a good work. And gratitude for each and every one of you for the work that you do to help the world heal. I have so much gratitude for each of you. Thank you, Pebbles and Tara, for putting it on. And Nancy, it's always beautiful. I wish I could reach through and give you a high five. So it's fun.